Alright, spoiler warning for all of MoonKnight. MoonKnight, wow, what a great story. I had no knowledge of the character going in, but this easily became my favorite of the MCU shows. It actually took the time to explore themes of mental illness and trauma, and it was amazing seeing it done through the lens of Egyptian mythology. Oscar Isaac did an absolutely phenomenal job in the role, and I loved how the show actually made the audience question what was real. The visuals were great, and the Egyptian gods are such a great inclusion to the MCU. Overall, I had an amazing time with it. However, as is common with the MCU, the weakest part of the show was the villain. Arthur Harrow started out fairly decent, but with such an introspective show focusing on one character, it wasn't surprised that he ended up getting shortchanged. Ethan Hawke's a great actor, but he didn't have much to work with. He did the best he could with the time he had, but it just wasn't enough. And to be clear, I'm talking about the Arthur we see in the real world. The therapist Arthur was a great reveal and a fun change of pace, but I don't count them as the same person. All the same, I think there were some interesting seeds planted for Harrow. He was a troubled man, haunted by his servitude to Khonshu. Ideally, we would have fleshed that out a bit, but I don't think the tragic backstory is absolutely necessary. No, to me, there's just one episode where they should have changed his character choices. The finale. There was a very interesting seed planted in the beginning of that episode, but for some reason, they decided not to explore it. So I'm going to explain what I wish they would have done with Arthur Harrow. Watching the MoonKnight cast interviews, I've seen Ethan Hawke describe his character as an old-school cult leader. That definitely comes through in the show. He's a fanatic, a devoted follower of Ammit, believing in her mission wholeheartedly. That's the key, though. He's devoted to the mission more than the god herself. So what would be the most interesting thing to do for this fanatical devotee? Challenge him by having his god not live up to the idea that he's built up in his head. And they had the very beginnings of that in the finale. When Ammit is first freed, she asks who freed her, and Harrow says that he did. He adds that he wishes he could be her servant, but his scales remain unbalanced, and that he accepts his fate. But Ammit dismisses those concerns. Harrow reacts with confusion. He says that there are others with balanced scales who would be more than happy to serve her, but she bestows him power anyway, saying she is in need of a servant with unbalanced scales. And that right there was a great way to crack at Arthur's beliefs. I thought they were going to take that further, but they didn't. So, in my reworked version, that scene would still happen, but it would linger more with Harrow, really showing that he was confused why his god wasn't exactly what he thought. However, he'd still accept the power and continue on. After that, Ammit also gives some of her purple magic power to Harrow's goons. The reason for this is that I'm changing it so that Mark and Harrow don't really fight physically, so having the goons powered up lets MoonKnight and Scarlet Scarab have a cool action scene still. Also in this version, there wouldn't be that other avatar that explains to Layla how to trap Ammit. She still goes into the temple and frees Khonshu, the guy's just not there. Then, a bit later in the episode, Arthur and his men are moving toward the city. Ammit is still normal sized at this point and is following close behind them. Some soldiers from the Egyptian army approach them, guns raised. Harrow gestures to his men to back off, saying they must be judged. He freezes them with the power of his staff, then walks towards their leader. Harrow uses his staff to cast judgment on the man, and we see the scales balance. Just as Harrow is about to say, "This is a good man," Ammit raises her hands. With a swift movement, she sucks the souls from all the soldiers standing in front of them. Harrow stares in horror as the body topples from his hands. A second later, he turns to Ammit and says, "Why did you do that? His scales were balanced, and the others were yet to be judged." "They were in our way," Ammit responds. "But he deserved to live. He was a good man." "Are you questioning me?" Ammit hisses, her crocodile teeth inches from Harrow's face. In that moment, you can see him realize what he's done, and that he's in over his head. This god is not what he thought. After a minute, he shakes his head. "Good," Ammit says. "Then go, march on Cairo, and show them my judgment." Harrow and the goons continue to the city, leaving Ammit behind to grow really big. So yeah, that's the big moment that gets Harrow thinking more. Maybe there can be a few more moments where Ammit shows she doesn't just punish those with unbalanced scales, but I think this would suffice. Khonshu and Ammit get big and have their epic fight as we get to the part of the episode where they're moving into the Cairo streets and judging everyone. This time, Harrow is with them instead of being on the pyramid. While his minions are judging people, Harrow's off to the side. He's looking at the staff head, staring into the crocodile's eye. You can tell he's really mulling things over. Then he puts the staff on his wrists and briefly casts his own scales. Obviously, we know they'll show up unbalanced, but this is more of a reminder to himself. Seeing the red ink on his arm really drives home that he should not be here, that Ammit doesn't follow the code he thought she did. MoonKnight arrives and Layla meets up with him. The two of them head into the streets and find Harrow's men. They square off against the goons who'd been powered up by Amit. You can get creative here, with some of them able to blast the purple energy, others using it to augment their punching to make it even more powerful, stuff like that. The two heroes face off against them, and we get an epic action scene. Eventually, they manage to defeat all of the henchmen. They find Harrow casually sitting on a piece of rubble not too far off, staring at Amit's staff. They slowly move to surround him, but he makes no aggressive moves. After a moment, he says, "It seems my own judgments were wrong. Amit is not the god I thought she was." He can monologue for a bit here, basically explaining his change of heart. After he's finished, Mark says, "That's all well and good, but that monster is out there. You released her, and no amount of feeling sorry is going to help us put an end to this." Harrow says, "You can't beat her. Not like this." "Then how do we stop her?" Mark asks. That's when Harrow explains the whole idea of binding Amit to someone with the help of the avatars. Except in this version, he volunteers to be the one to take on Amit. In a narrative sense, he's accepting that he must carry the burden of his actions with him. They go into the temple, and the rest of the episode plays out basically exactly the same. They bind Amit to Harrow, Mark still refuses to kill Harrow, and asks to be released from Khonshu. Now, unfortunately, these changes would mean no epic shot of MoonKnight kneeing Harrow on top of the pyramid, or Jake Lockley showing up to beat the hell out of him. But I think it's worth it. These changes to the story create cognitive dissonance in Harrow's mind. Amit is not as perfect as he thought. I know it might seem a little sudden to have the main villain have a change of heart like this. Ideally, we'd have an episode or so to marinate with the idea of Harrow betraying Amit, but no way I'm messing with the perfection that is episode 5. However, I think it still works. Harrow is devoted and fanatical, yes, but those core ideals get shaken by Amit's actions in this version. It forces him to become more introspective and reckon with what he's done. Because remember, he was already ready to die. He doesn't care about ruling the world or ultimate power. It's about creating a world free of evil, and he knows he is still evil. Amit is not the ultimate answer like he thought she was. He believes in the mission more than the god, and when the god doesn't live up to his idea of her, I don't think betrayal is an unreasonable reaction. And I think the post-credit scene would still work with these changes. Personally, I'd probably lean towards cutting it, just because it seems too easy on Harrow. He agreed to bind Amit to himself, and he should have to pay for releasing her. Death seems more like a way out for him, but it's not the end of the world if the post-credit scene is still there. So yeah, that's the pitch. With only a very few minor tweaks to the finale of MoonKnight and a couple extra scenes, I think they could have made a much more satisfying conclusion for the villain of MoonKnight. And in case it wasn't clear, I absolutely loved MoonKnight, and I'm not claiming to be a better writer than the people who made it. Their entire team did an amazing job with the show, and the script was great. Full credit to them for crafting such an engaging story. I just enjoyed doing these little rewrites as a way to reimagine shows and practice my own writing. But tell me what you think. Do you like this change? Is there another way Arthur's story could have ended? Drop a comment and let me know. Special shout out to my friend Parker for helping me come up with some of these ideas, and thank you very much for watching.